In 1951, a psychologist asked people to look at 3 lines and pick the one that matched a reference line. It wasn't hard. The answer was obvious. Except when everyone else in the room confidently picked the wrong one. 3 out of every 4 people changed their answer to match the group. Not because they saw something different, because they doubted what they knew. Here's the question that should unsettle you. If the smartest people in that room stayed quiet, what if we lost by never hearing them?
We assume intelligence rises to the surface, that the sharpest minds naturally lead conversations, dominate meetings, shape opinions. But look closer at any room, any company, any dinner table, and you'll notice something strange. The most confident voice is rarely the most correct one, and the people who could offer the deepest insight are often the ones saying nothing at all. Why would someone with more to say choose to say less?
This isn't a personality quirk. It's a pattern with roots in psychology, evolution, and economics. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments, the ones with the lines, revealed something uncomfortable. Humans will override their own perception to avoid social friction. We are wired for belonging before we are wired for truth-telling. That wiring made sense for most of human history. For 200,000 years, exile from the group meant death. Being right and alone was far more dangerous than being wrong and included. Modern life hasn't erased that instinct. It's just changed the stakes, from survival to reputation.
Consider what psychologists call the Dunning-Kruger effect. People with limited knowledge in a subject often overestimate their competence because they don't know enough to recognize their own gaps. The inverse is just as real and far less discussed. People with genuine expertise tend to underestimate their competence because they're acutely aware of everything they don't know. This is sometimes called impostor phenomenon, first documented by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes in 1978.
Confidence and competence, it turns out, are not the same currency, and rooms tend to reward the former. There's also the concept of epistemic cost. Every time someone corrects a group, challenges a consensus, or offers a complex answer to a simple question, they pay a social tax. Sociologist Irving Goffman described this as impression management, the constant, often unconscious calculation of how our words will be perceived, not just whether they're true. Intelligent people run this calculation faster than most. That speed can look like silence.
In 2003, NASA engineers grew concerned about foam debris that had struck the Space Shuttle Columbia during launch. One engineer, Rodney Rocha, sent an email requesting satellite imagery to assess the damage. He never sent it up the chain with the urgency he felt internally. He later said he didn't want to be seen as a Chicken Little, someone raising alarm without proof. Columbia disintegrated on re-entry. All 7 crew members died. The investigation that followed didn't find a lack of intelligence at NASA. It found a culture where raising uncomfortable truths felt more dangerous than staying quiet. Sociologist Diane Vaughan, who studied the disaster, called it the normalization of deviance, a slow organizational drift where concerns get quietly absorbed instead of voiced. This wasn't a failure of knowledge. It was a failure of permission.
Several forces compound to keep intelligent people quiet. First, pluralistic ignorance, a phenomenon where most people privately doubt something but stay silent because they assume everyone else disagrees with them. So a room full of people with the same doubt says nothing, each person convinced they're the only skeptic. Second, the curse of knowledge. Once someone understands a complex idea, they struggle to explain it simply.
and they know a partial explanation will sound wrong or arrogant, so they default to nothing.
Third, social cost aversion. Neuroscience research using fMRI has shown that social rejection activates some of the same brain regions as physical pain. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between I might get hurt and I might get judged. Put these together, and silence stops looking like weakness. It starts looking like a rational, if costly, adaptation.
Here's where it gets more consequential. This isn't just about individuals losing confidence, it's about entire systems losing information. Organizational psychologist Amy Edmondson coined the term psychological safety after studying hospital teams. Her surprising finding? The best performing teams reported more errors, not fewer. Not because they made more mistakes, but because they felt safe admitting them. The teams with the highest apparent harmony, the ones where nobody spoke up, often had the worst outcomes. Silence wasn't peace, it was information failure in disguise. Scale this up. Financial analysts who suspected fraud before the 2008 crisis but didn't escalate concerns loudly enough. Engineers who sensed design flaws but assumed leadership had already accounted for them. Employees who saw problems forming and calculated, correctly in the short term, that speaking up would cost more than staying silent. Multiply one quiet, competent person by an entire institution, and you get blind spots large enough to sink economies. None of this means the answer is reckless oversharing or manufactured confidence. Intelligence isn't obligated to perform itself. But there's a difference between choosing silence and defaulting to it. A few shifts change the equation. Separate the fear of being wrong from the fear of being disliked. They feel identical, but they demand different responses. One requires more evidence. The other requires more courage.
Ask before you assert. A question carries insight without inviting the social risk of a declaration. What if we're missing something? Often does more than "you're wrong." Recognize that certainty is often a performance, not a signal of truth. The most confident voice in the room is frequently confident because they haven't considered the complexity you have. That's not a reason to stay silent. It's a reason to speak with precision instead of volume. And remember, every historical moment where silence had catastrophic consequences shared one detail. Someone knew. Someone almost said something. We tend to measure intelligence by what people know. But maybe the more accurate measure is what they're willing to say and when. Somewhere right now, in a meeting, a classroom, a family conversation, someone who sees the answer clearly is deciding it isn't worth the risk of being heard. The question isn't whether intelligent people have something to say. It's whether we've built rooms safe enough for them to say it.